Everybody likes to call themselves an education innovator, that is, anybody who's in the education field, but I think that most education people are very entrenched in what San Francisco Chronicle columnist called the education blob. It's as immovable as a bunch of molasses on the floor. One of the topics I probably feel I have more strong opinions about how to change it and hopefully do it wisely are the topic of today's show, Reinventing Education. But I want to say up front something that will start by shocking you, but I never say anything for shock value. It's what I believe. We all hold out hope that education is the magic pill, the great savior that will close the achievement gap, that will enable us to achieve like we did in the Sputnik era, to compete against the Russians. The older we get, the more advanced society gets, the more we realize how much of who we are is determined by our genes and our early parenting and our peers. Education is less potent than we like. As way back in the 60s, they found that whether the kid went to private school or public school didn't make much difference. There have been more recent studies that show that you take randomly assigned kids and you send some of them to Tony prep schools and some to inner city schools, and the kids don't turn out very different. Student achievement has certainly, American students' achievement has gone down over the years, not so much frankly because teaching has gotten worse, because our population demographics have become, to use the acceptable term, more challenging. That all said, I think there are things that could make a difference. You'll note that the things I'm talking about are not yet more money. We spend number one, number two, or number three, depending on which survey you believe, per capita on education in the world, and our achievement falls somewhere around number 25, number 27, 28. I haven't looked it up recently, but somewhere after Estonia or Italy or whatever, and certainly behind all the Asian countries. But that all said, it seems to me incontrovertible that education could improve, and I'll say it up front, I believe one of the major impediments is the union. The Teachers Union, the National Education Association, and California Teachers Association, they claim to be caring about kids, but they really are, like any other union, advocates to keep teacher jobs. And the truth is that teacher quality varies very widely, and even a teacher who is good in year one can burn out by year five, but the unions have wrested these contract agreements that give teachers basically lifetime tenure after 2 years, and it's nearly impossible to get rid of a teacher after those first couple of years. It requires so much effort on the part of the principal, and so many lawyers will defend from the teachers union that the principal just says, what the hell, we'll just move the teacher to some other school. In any case, so they're the biggest impediment and a problem, but especially in an ever more democratic run government, which we are going to see, the teachers union will remain very entrenched. They have donated hugely to the Democratic Party, and so nothing is going to change in that regard. That all said, what I'm going to recommend are things that can change things a lot, even under that onerous set of restrictions. I really think that we need to recruit teachers more wisely. You know, it is an oft-buried fact that the average SAT score of a teacher is the lowest among all professions. That's not a formula for great teaching, which requires great moxie, ability to be creative, thoughtful, ever innovative, coming up with interesting solutions to the challenge of teaching 30 diverse kids in a class. And now we've deemed unacceptable the ability group classes. And so now you've got the additional challenge heaped on teachers of having to teach kids who are from newcomers to English to native speakers, from the mainstreamed, what they used to call educationally mentally retarded, now they're called developmentally disabled, to the gifted, all in the same class. An absurd Herculean challenge which few teachers, let alone those we tend to recruit, require. And the part of the reason that no good teacher wants to be there is because A, it requires an enormous number of absolutely common sense crap courses that have either the common sense crap or they have limited applicability to the classroom, like Piagetian theory. And there's no if you're really good, you get not a dime more thanks to the unions than anybody who is. If you're a mediocre teacher, what quality person would want to deal with that? So we need to try to give at minimum a bright teacher, even if you got the damn union there that's going to make sure everybody gets paid the same, and that you get tenure and you keep your job no matter what. There needs to be autonomy for the really brilliant teacher to be freed from some of those rules and really to encourage some of those best and brightest. We did it with Teach for America, but in the end, the teaching situation is so untenable in so many schools that many of those people who taught in Teach for America went on saying after 2 or 3 years, I'm throwing my hands up, I can't deal. The most important innovation that I can suggest is when the teachers union would fight with every bone in its very powerful body. And that is what I call ultra courses. Let's take a course that many of us can relate to, algebra. It's a typically difficult course for many people, and it is unfortunately that combination of it being a difficult course, it tends to be taught by teachers who are not the most verbal, not at the best explaining, because those are people who go into math rather than verbal areas. So you take that combination, and across the nation's 40,000 algebra teachers. Sure, there are going to be some brilliant, transformative, wonderful teachers and some absolutely horrific ones, but on average, you're not going to get great teaching, and yet algebra is considered the gateway course for college level, college level high school, and for college level careers like engineering and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So imagine instead of the random assortment of teachers, and again, if we want to appeal to the liberal base here, you want to make sure that the kids in the inner city have the equal opportunity to the kids in Beverly Hills. Well, if instead of that average assortment of teachers being randomly assigned and perhaps disproportionately, the poor teachers are not wanting so eagerly to teach in challenging areas, you had a dream team of the world's best teachers who taught their very best versions. They divided up the algebra class into what they taught best, and with the assistance of some computer gaming experts from computer gaming companies, and with interactivity from computer programmers, you had brilliant world-class interactive instruction with simulations that was provided to every kid online available, at which they could do either at home or in a school with a paraprofessional in the class to watch to classroom management. That way every kid from Maine to California, from Harlem to Beverly Hills, is going to get world-class instruction. If anything is going to teach algebra better, that's going to do it. I call it ultra classes. I have had articles on that published in the Washington Post, the Atlantic, Psychology Today, and I've left, frankly, voicemails with some of the leading educators in the nation, high-level people at the U.S. Department of Education, and nothing. It's an incontrovertible argument, and yet nothing. And it would save a fortune, but nobody seems to care about taxpayer dollars. Let's turn to something less esoteric and more obvious, the length of the school day. Why in the world is the school day and school year, which was established during farming times, with summers off, continue now? School should be so interesting, with those ultra courses and interesting extracurriculars and better quality teachers, unlike the random assortment we get. So the kids wouldn't want to be racing out of there at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. There's all these minimum days now that the union has rested. Oh no, they have to have their in-service training during the regular 6-hour days. 6-hour days, banking hours. Ridiculous. And we put up with it. We are just sheep. We will vote for candidates who are in the union's hip pocket. The other thing, why are we promoting kids based on seat time? How many days they sat in the class and barely passed? It should be competency-based. And this is not the 15th century. All these ultra courses should be in little modules. And when a kid passes a certain number of modules, he moves up, not by grade, moment by moment. And I'm not ignoring extracurricular activities. There can still be a school campus for extracurriculars and non-academic subjects. But this notion that you pass 3 kids through merely because 180 days has passed is absurd. The curriculum may be the most absurd of all. Liberals run the schools, and you would think that they would be the ones to make the biggest objections to our unbelievably elitist curriculum, where every kid is expected to learn esoterica they'll never use in their life, but the elite professors insist are important. Shakespeare, geometric theorems, the causes of the Peloponnesian Wars. Oh, of course there's great potential implications for life today, when kids can't even balance a checkbook. can't resolve a conflict between people, can't begin to choose what the hell career they're going to choose. And we're busy teaching stochastic processes to every kid? Yeah, the chemist in college may need to know that. Well, does need to know that. But every high school kid? In elementary school, the new vaunted common curriculum, again, developed by the liberal educators, makes kids learn things like the area of a parabola in the 5th grade. Graphing it. What the hell do they need to know that for? And more important, let me say that more pointedly. Compared to what they really need to know, how to estimate, how to do probabilities. What's the probability of this occurring? Even how to make change. That's not in the curriculum. We're too busy graphing points on a graph. Absurd. Let's turn a little out of order to the notion in light of COVID. Of course, the education blob criticizes pods. They're elitist. It enables rich parents to provide good education for their kids. You know what? Those parents end up not hiring anybody, whether they're middle class or rich. If you're dirt poor, I swear to you, if I were dirt poor, I would simply get together a group of parents who lived in my project, and we would choose one of the parents who was unemployed, like millions of others in those projects, who nonetheless was good with kids, and I would divide up a little board and who's in charge for those 5. They'd be in pods of 5 kids, a number that's small enough for individualization, not too many discipline problems. And thanks to the computer, there's all kinds of great lessons on the internet, all kinds of books free at the library. And even poor kids, yes, believe me, I taught in the inner city in Richmond and in New York City, and I've been in their homes, and they have plenty of books around. They just sit around because they'd rather drink Coke and watch TV. But there are plenty of books around. You don't need a fancy curriculum. Kids can learn by being asked interesting questions, to make guesses, to explore nature, to make hypotheses, do little tests. Go to the library. It's not that our vaunted education system with the massive education bureaucracies doing so much good for kids. We're not seeing such great... We've seen no closing the achievement gap in these 50 years, despite trillions of dollars spent in supposedly compensatory education. Meanwhile, what we've done is we've taken reallocated money that used to go to gifted kids who had great potential and who did enable us to win in the Sputnik wars against the Russians. And now we reallocate it to the lowest achievers of all. That's not a formula for reducing America to the lowest common denominator. I don't know what it is. So pods, it's very easy for big liberal educators to decry them. But by the way, speaking of which, the guy who is the superintendent of Alexander, Virginia, big critic of pods as elitist, increasing income inequality, unequal education. What did he do? He pulled his kids out and sent them to private school. Nothing like a good liberal hypocrite. The ultimate example, of course, it's an aside. How could Al Gore call himself the ultimate environmentalist when he had 5 SUVs, a 50,000 square foot compound where he lived in private jets? Yet the media gives him a pass. Barbara Streisand will go and sing an hour for the poor and then sit home behind her gated community in Bel Air and stare at her $100 million pink diamond collection. She cared so much about the poor, she'd open the gates to all the illegal immigrants she cares so much about and sell all those that $100 million in pink diamonds and give 10,000 each to each of those illegal immigrants. But he doesn't do that. She'd rather sit in her lovely posh place and look at her pink diamonds. Much easier to sing for an hour and get all the accolades from the liberal media. Now let's talk about curriculum specifically. I think what I'll do is, though, take a brief break. Stay with me just about 10 seconds. I'll be back. Let's talk about preschool. One size does not fit all, should not fit all. This focus on academics for all kids is absurd. Yes, kids who, let's just say, start out life learning very slowly may need an academic preschool like Head Start, but typical middle-class kids do not. They are wise probably to go to some kind of preschool, if only to give the parent child care flexibility. But it shouldn't be academic. It should be primarily experiential play, wandering, exploring, and dabbling into bits of interaction, as is limited usually at that age. My thoughts about elementary school. There, I really think that that the iPad and other devices are underutilized. There is this absolutely unproven assertion that screen time is bad for kids. No one's saying the kid should sit in front of a screen all day, but the incredible entertainment value, individualization, and educational value of such amazing software that's out there should not mean that kids should instead be forced to sit with that and random assortment of teachers. Most of them are nice, but a hell of a lot less educational and less stimulating than the best computer programs that are individualized. I also think in elementary school it is absurd, especially the millions of active boys, that we make them sit for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. Kids need to be much more active and out and not put on a Ritalin leash. I also think this obsession with teamwork is way overdone. Unless you know something, you can't be on a team. Then it's just a social clutch. I was sitting next to dinner to an Asian woman who laughs at America's focusing on everything in teams, even in elementary school, and kids don't know anything. They're just spouting off, so they never really grow or learn anything. There needs to be a primacy of teaching kids to know and understand reading and math, really understand numeracy. What does 100 really mean relative to 10? What does 1,000 really mean? How does one estimate what something should cost? What is the probability something should occur? When you're reading that paragraph, what's really the intent of the author? You do that in teams, it's not going to happen. There needs to be a primacy of learning something before you put people in teams. Teams can be a little bonus at the end where they get to apply what they learned through study and didacticism. And this is complete. What I'm saying may seem common sense to you, but it is absolutely diametrically opposed to the obsession we've had for the last 30 years about project-based learning. Project-based learning is slipshod. Catch as catch can, and with huge gaps accruing. It's absurd. In middle school, we should start to see increased use of the ultra classes I described, but still within a classroom, because kids are probably still too young to be doing their academic learning at home. But those ultra classes are the key. If we can only stop the unions from stifling innovation at all costs so they can save jobs. You save a teacher's job, you hurt a child when you're comparing it with what could be learned with ultra classes. And at the high school level, my model is that you have the kids basically spend their mornings at home using a thumbprint ID or iris recognition ID so that it's them in front of the computer. And they choose whatever module they feel like that day to study through using an ultra class. Whether it be English or math or science or social studies, whatever. They may be in a different mood in a certain day. It's fine. Because there's individualized computer record keeping, which is very easy to do. And then in the afternoon, then they go to school. What for? For what school can only do in person, which is the socialization and the extracurricular activities. That also would reduce greatly the COVID restrictions on social distancing. You could have half the kids come in the morning, half the kids come in the afternoon for the co-curricular activities. That's what I do at high school. At college, there would be so much of that ultra courses stuff. And again, I think the campus The college costs have bloated so much because of the unbelievable bureaucracy. Frankly, it has heavily been created around diversity. It's amazing how many billions of dollars needed to manage this great treasure we have called diversity. Billions and billions. And campuses that to attract students to pay these enormous amounts of money for what is often little learning and certainly less promise than in the old days of getting a good job. They build these country club-like campuses, fabulous dorms, fabulous athletic centers, and spend on big-time sports. If I were running a college, it would have a minimal campus with as much as possible using recreational facilities in the community swimming pools, community gymnasiums, and of course there would be conclaves of various sorts on campus for clubs, and not everything can and should be done virtually. There would be intramural athletics, but it would be a greatly streamed day. It would be a hell of a lot less shrubs and spending on shrubbery, and a hell of a lot less on administration. And because of the use of ultra classes, it would be a hell of a lot lower teaching costs. Certainly there would be discussion sections, both virtual and online, in person. But that would drive the cost dramatically lower. The university's main purpose should be graduate school and research, not undergraduate education. That's not what they do well. They hire faculty largely based on how well they do research, and most importantly, how they bring in the money, how much money they bring in. And the skills required to be a great typical undergraduate teacher are orthogonal, that is, inversely correlated with the skills required to be a great researcher. The great researcher has to be narrow, obsessive, detailed, on some little cutting edge. The great undergraduate instructor has to be focused on the ability to explain fairly broad swaths of material in compelling ways to undergraduates who have nowhere near the intelligence and drive and expertise that researchers have. How dare universities charge kids so much money for education taught by these people who are selected specifically for skills that are likely to make them bad teachers on average? Of course, we can point to individuals who are good teachers. Their BS assertions that good researchers make good teaching is just a slogan. Garbage. What makes good teaching is someone whose lifetime is committed to great teaching, to taking the time to create great lessons. You spend too much time creating great lessons, it's the kiss of death when it comes to tenure, because it's research and the dollars you bring in that cause tenure, not teaching evaluations. The teaching evaluations really have to be above the sewer level to avoid getting fired. Is that what we're paying for? That's absurd. I want to end by talking a little bit about what parents can do in each of those regards. There is no need for you to volunteer at the kids' bake sale or the PTA. Those are time-consuming and have minimal benefit to your kid. The two most important things you could do as a parent is to take your time to choose your kid's school properly. Yes, the scuttlebutt from parents can be helpful. Yes, the test scores can be helpful. But do visit a couple of schools, public if possible, so you can save the money. And don't just buy the principal's sales pitch, because some principals are great salespeople, others are not, others don't care to be. But importantly, ask permission to walk down the halls, maybe peek into classrooms, visit some classrooms, and get in touch whether you would be happy, successful, stimulated in that school. Hang out on the yard during recess. Of course, all kids will occasionally, they'll be scuffles, but in general, is the tenor of the place positive and peaceful and kind? Is it verbal? Is it intelligent? Or is it argumentative, physical, violent? Just do that a few times and you'll pick the right school. That's a one-time effort, and that will help ensure a good few years for your kid. And again, your kid can survive a bad teacher one year, but sometimes if you keep your ear to the ground, you're going to hear that the next year's teachers, one of them may be much better suited to your kid than the other. Maybe your kid's a bright kid, and a particular teacher is very good with bright kids. That's the time to talk to the principal and explain that your child really would be far better fit. Doesn't say that the other teacher's worse. Would be far better suited if in Mrs. Jones's class. And that can work. Those are two one-time efforts that aren't very time-consuming, that can make a much bigger difference than any ongoing involvement. Now I want to turn to after school. Biggest mistake parents make, I think, is to overschedule their kids. I think unstructured time is fine. If your kid is a wild kid who's going to get in big time trouble, you need to give the kid some more structure. But general, give your kid freedom as well as lots of choices in terms of activities. My particular bugaboo is music lessons. Music lessons tend to be laborious, repetitive, horrible, and don't encourage the kid end up to doing what the kid really would like to do, what you would like to see the kid do. It could be, for example, to play the piano, be able to sit down easily and play by ear. Instead, the kid is chained to the notes, and it's painful and horrible. If after a brief stint of music lessons or even learning to play by ear, the kid doesn't show talent, let the kid go. Let the kid do what is naturally him. If he's a soccer person, fine. Even if he's a video game player, fine. If he's a reader, fine. If he's a social butterfly, fine. Of course, it could be he or she in all those examples. Don't overschedule your kid. I do find that summer camp for some kids is one of the more rewarding activities, educationally, socially, and personally. But again, choose it carefully. The biggest thing is not so much the activities, it's the kids. Got the right kids and they'll make their own good activities. You got violent kids, drug abusing kids, dumb kids. It tends to be a bad experience. In any event, education may be the most overrated product, but it also has potential to do some real good if both you as a parent make the most of the system as it is, and if the damn system was less beholden to the teachers union and was more innovatively oriented. In any case, this is Marty Nemko reminding you that we find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.